Good evening. I'm Kelda Yoon. A man is dead after being shot by police in Scarborough. It happened just after 3 o'clock this afternoon outside a medical building on Ellesmere Road, just west of Birchmount. And that's where we find our Tyler Cheese tonight. And Tyler, we know the SIU has been called in. What can you tell us about the shooting?
Yeah, Kelda, the scene here has pretty much been cleared up, but until a few moments ago, the parking lot behind me was filled with police cars. Now, when it comes to the shooting itself, what we do know is that a series of 911 calls were made before the incident, reporting a man on the road threatening drivers. We've spoken to some witnesses who say he had a large hammer and may have been waving it around. Police have not verified those reports, but they did say they recovered a hammer at the scene.
As far as the nature of how that hammer may or may not have been used in this incident, we don't yet have that. There are investigators currently at the scene. They're interviewing civilian witnesses, and they're also contacting people who might have any video, that type of thing.
When police officers arrived at the scene, there was a short confrontation with the man. Soon after, one officer shot the man with a firearm while another one shot him with a taser. The Special Investigations Unit, the overseeing body for incidents involving police, says this all happened within 10 to 15 minutes of those first 911 calls.
The information that I have is that it was a single shot that was fired. The man was taken to hospital where he was pronounced deceased. There will be a post-mortem exam that will be scheduled at a future date, and there'll also be officer designations. It's early yet and those designations haven't been made, but I would surmise that there'd be one subject official that would be designated. That means that the SIU will be criminally investigating the officer who discharged the firearm.
The shooting has left those who live and work in the area rattled.
It's concerning because I live in the area, and I just kind of think about it as if I was taking my daughter in for an appointment, I'd be, scared for our safety, especially hers, and I would want to keep her safe, but it's hitting home, close to home.
As a nurse working here, it's pretty scary because we are helping people and we're frontline workers, so this is what we deal with on a daily basis. We help everyone unknowing that they could injure us at any moment.
The SIU has taken over the investigation. The agency says it's interviewing witnesses who were at the scene and will be reviewing body camera footage from the responding police officers. Stretches of Ellesmere Road between Birchmount and Warden Avenue remain closed as the investigation continues. Now, some witnesses say they think the man may have been experiencing a mental health crisis, but when asked about that, the SIU representative said it's too early in the investigation to tell. However, she did say that the event happened quickly enough that officers likely would not have been able to enact crisis intervention tactics. As for the man himself, Kelda, police are not releasing any more information at this time.
Thanks so much, Tyler. Our Tyler Cheese reporting from Scarborough tonight. Meanwhile, in Etobicoke, one man is dead and 4 others injured after a shooting at a high school last night. Police saying this is the 3rd shooting in the same neighborhood this weekend. Greg Ross has more.
North Albion Collegiate was riddled with bullet holes after police say 2 unknown suspects opened fire on a group of men. They were gathered in the parking lot at the school after a soccer match. Police say they arrived to a grisly scene.
They located 5 victims suffering from gunshot wounds. Officers immediately attended to the victims, providing first aid.
All 5 victims were transported to a nearby hospital. One of them died from his injuries a short time later. The others are expected to survive.
4 other people remain in hospital. One of the victims has serious life-altering injuries, and the remaining 3 are being treated for gunshot wounds. All of the victims are older men.
Police say the victims all range between 40 and 60 years old. CBC News has identified one of the victims, Seymour Gibbs, who was shot in the leg 3 times according to his family. He remains in hospital after undergoing surgery.
I want justice for my family.
His stepdaughter says the family is still in shock. She says Gibbs has been playing soccer here for years.
I basically grew up here. This was basically my whole childhood. It's all I ever know.
Other friends and family members of the victims dropped off flowers today. Police have not identified the man who died in the shooting, but this woman, who did not want to appear on camera out of fear for her safety, says he was a friend.
He's a wonderful soul. All you get is a smile. We're still in shock. We still need answers. We still need to know why.
Police say it's not clear what the motive is behind the shooting. They say surveillance video from the area shows 2 suspects arriving in a pickup truck.
We're looking for a black or dark colored, newer model pickup truck. The 2 suspects we believe involved are wearing dark clothing.
Police say this was the 3rd shooting in this neighborhood in a 24-hour period. A 20-year-old man and a 14-year-old boy were both shot over the weekend in this area in what police believe are random attacks. Both of those victims are expected to be okay.
This is a community concern, it's community safety, and we all want to make the community safer.
As you can imagine, the residents here in this community are very concerned, and the police say they're doing their best to address those concerns. One of the things that they've done is they've brought in a mobile command unit that they say is going to be parked here for quite some time. And there are 2 reasons to bring that here. Number 1, to have that police presence here so that people feel safer here. And number 2, they want a place where people can go if they have information. Remember, the police are still investigating all 3 of these shootings, and they have very little to go on when it comes to suspects. So they're hoping that people will come to them and talk to them here. We've seen officers out in the community talking to members as well, trying to get some information about what exactly happened here at this shooting and those other 2 shootings over the weekend, Kelda.
All right, thanks so much, Greg. Convocation ceremonies are underway at the University of Toronto and will continue over the next 3 weeks. Thousands of students walked the stage today to receive their diplomas against the backdrop of a pro-Palestinian encampment that has been on campus for more than a month now. This despite a trespass notice and looming legal action. Chris Glover has more from King's College Circle.
The university says that it is determined to have all 34 of their graduation ceremonies take place in Convocation Hall, and they say that they're going to do that with stepped up security. And some of that is things that people can see, physical stuff like we have right here, this fence kind of blocking from view the encampment that you, Kelda, just mentioned, which is just a little bit further beyond in that big grassy area. Of course, this is the encampment that has been there since May 2nd, and some of the other security that'll be in those convocation ceremonies are going to be ID checks, bag checks, that sort of thing. And I spoke with some of the students who went into the earlier one at 2:30, and one of the students said it was a bit of a distraction having all this hang over them. But many of the students that I spoke to said that they were on board with what these students were doing. And then once the actual 2:30 ceremony got underway, we did see that some of them were holding keffiyehs, others had Palestinian flags. There was a banner at one point on the stage as well. And I spoke with one of the students, Sahar Hamdan, who's not a part of the encampment movement, but she is sympathetic to their concerns. She brought a Palestinian flag on stage with her as she accepted her degree. Here's more from Sahar.
I think the university should side with what the students want, and there's a general population of what the students want, and the students are not going to stop till we come to a fair agreement. And I don't think the university's meeting our needs adequately, I'd say.
Okay, so Kelda, we have the students graduating going in on that side of the building, and just on this side of the building earlier this morning, there was a protest graduation held by members of the encampment. And as a part of that, they were trying to draw attention to all of the students who have been killed in Gaza as a result of the war, perhaps who would have been graduating this year, who will never get to see that graduation, given the ongoing onslaught and attack that they continue to face in Gaza from Israel. And so many of these protesters, as a part of the encampment, brought flowers. They laid them down. They also, importantly, left chairs empty. And we know that the university said that they were going to continue on with all of these ceremonies despite the encampment. But originally, they had wanted the encampment gone before these ceremonies began. And so they were hoping to hold a court injunction, to have a judge weigh in on whether or not they could have police help them to remove these tents from this location. Originally, the university had wanted that to be on May 31st or June 3rd, so that would be ahead of many of these ceremonies. Now we know that that will be June 19th and 20th. That's when that hearing will be held into whether or not there is going to be a court injunction to have the police help the university here remove these tents from this location. And we know that a number of groups are hoping to speak at that hearing to get what's called intervener status. And we found out today that a number of Jewish groups got intervener status. One of those is Hillel Ontario. They held a press conference today as well, talking about the harms that, in their opinion, opinion, this encampment is doing. They say that it's allowing hate to fester on campus and grow, and they say that some Jewish students were scared away from coming to their graduation ceremonies because it's so close, and they say that they're facing ongoing harassment. I want you to listen to Hillel Ontario spokesperson.
We continue to call on the U of T administration to show leadership and send a clear message that a hateful, anti-Jewish occupation of the campus will not be tolerated. This hate fest has gone on for far too long, and it is past time for those engaged in shouting anti-Semitic slogans or harassing and abusing Jewish students to be held accountable for their actions.
And you heard there that spokesperson saying anti-Jewish, this protest. That is something that many of these protesters take exception to. They say that they're not anti-Jewish. They're against the state of Israel and the ongoing war that is going against the people in the Palestinian territory. And so they say that that is what they're fighting against, pointing out that some of their members within that tent encampment, some of them I've spoken to directly, who say that they themselves are Jewish as well. There are still 32 other convocation ceremonies that will take place in the days ahead, and all of this happening prior to that court injunction that we're waiting for later on this month.
Yeah, definitely tense times. Thanks so much for this, Chris. Our Chris Glover at U of T tonight. Welcome back. Concerns over gaps in special education were raised at Queen's Park today. It comes after the death of a student who was found unresponsive inside his Ontario high school last month.
Gross funding is up, but per capita student funding is down. So this government is not keeping up with population increase or inflation increases, which becomes a real cut to schools. And the fact that principals are telling families with children with special needs not to come to school because they don't have enough staff to care for them is wrong, and this government needs to step up and fix it.
The death of Landon Ferris is under investigation by both police and the coroner's office. The 16-year-old had a rare form of epilepsy called Dravet syndrome. Ferris's family says he was found alone and unresponsive in a sensory room at Trenton High School. His death raising frustrations from parents and educators across the province. Over the weekend, dozens gathered in Mississauga to rally against what they call a chronic underfunding of schools. Ontario's Education Minister addressed those concerns at Queen's Park today.
We've increased special education funding, and this year funding is up roughly $117 million more than last year, with 3,500 additional EAs hired. I know there's more work to do, and I look forward to doing it together.
Advocates say the lack of funding is making it hard for already overstretched educators to properly care for children with complex needs. Lecce says all parties will work together to ensure this tragedy doesn't happen again. The deal to put Service Ontario kiosks in Staples stores is being investigated by the province's Financial Accountability Office. It comes after a request by a Liberal MPP who questioned how the arrangement happened without a bidding process. Queen's Park reporter Lorenda Redicott has more.
Putting Service Ontario kiosks inside 9 different Staples stores happened as a sole source deal, with the government closing other Service Ontario sites. It will now be investigated by Ontario's Financial Accountability Officer.
This is a situation where this was simply handed to Staples without any transparency.
Stephanie Bowman first wrote to the Financial Accountability Officer back in January. She also wanted him to look into plans for Walmart being allowed to have kiosks. The FAO responded that he'll only look at the initial pilot project for 9 Staples sites. Bowman hopes it will bring answers.
They're shutting down small businesses. This is not a government that's working for small business. They're working to make their rich friends richer, and we think that the government needs to be held accountable.
The FAO's report will compare the costs and benefits of the Staples locations to continuing contracts with independent private operators. It will look at how Staples will be compensated and whether this will affect jobs in the Ontario Public Service. Service Ontario already had locations inside stores, including Canadian Tire and Home Hardware. The minister responsible says he looks forward to what the FAO finds, confident the Staples deal makes sense.
In this case, of course, we have more for less. So we're saving $1 million over 3 years, and we're getting more convenience, more access, longer hours.
The longer hours mean opening evenings and weekends.
Why don't they just work with the existing Service Ontario operators to extend hours? Why do we need to pay Staples to renovate their stores to do it when we could just have it be part of the contract with existing Ontario-based operators?
This is clearly another bad deal. There's no apparent business case for it. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the FAO turns up.
But that's still months away. The FAO says its report will be finished in early 2025 at the soonest. There is a government tender open now looking for businesses to apply to have a Service Ontario site. It's a process Staples never had to go through. Lorenda Redicomp, CBC News, Toronto.
A 7-day disciplinary hearing has begun looking into alleged misconduct by a high-ranking Toronto police officer. Inspector Joyce Schertzer is facing charges for allegedly allowing her nephew to leave the scene of a single vehicle crash that damaged city property. Dale Manukduk reports.
The prosecution alleges that Toronto Police Inspector Joyce Schertzer used her position as 11th Division Unit Commander to benefit her family. On May 1st, 2022, a white pickup truck slammed into a light pole just outside the Boulevard Club along Lakeshore Boulevard West. The driver of that truck was the nephew of Toronto Police Inspector Schertzer. She's now facing misconduct charges for allegedly allowing her nephew to leave the scene, in turn contravening the force's conflict of interest policy and not allowing an investigation to take place into whether or not alcohol was involved. Today at a hearing, she pleaded not guilty to all charges. We also saw body cam footage and heard testimony from 2 officers. One was the front desk officer at 11th Division that day. The other was the responding officer to the crash. It's important to note that those 2 officers were from 11th Division, not 14th Division, where the crash happened. Now, the front desk officer testified that he got a call from Schertzer's daughter who said that she couldn't get a hold of her mom. He eventually connected the 2 and then later was asked by Schertzer to send an officer to the scene to meet her. Now, it's not normally the responsibility of a front desk agent to send an officer. That's usually central dispatch, but ultimately he checked who was available and sent somebody from 11th Division. Once that officer arrived on scene, the first person he spoke to was Inspector Schertzer, who relayed information that she had gathered from her nephew that he was leaving the Boulevard Club. There was a marathon that day. A private security guard was instructing people when it was safe to exit the parking lot. He instructed him that it was safe. He made a left onto Lakeshore Boulevard West, but had to swerve around a car heading eastbound. That's when he hit a curb and then a light pole. Now, after speaking to Inspector Schertzer, he spoke to her nephew to verify his identity and get information about his vehicle. He then sent the nephew back to Inspector Scherzer's car and then turned off his body camera with Inspector Scherzer's approval. Now, once that body camera was turned back on, you could hear the officer give the all clear to the nephew to leave the scene because the officer testified that there was no evidence of any criminality at this incident. He also testified that he wishes he never turned the body camera off in the first place because there was no collusion or anything nefarious happening at the scene. Now, later on, a traffic services officer came to the scene. He brought the nephew back and issued him a careless driving ticket. Now, his body camera footage shows him telling the nephew that he's very fortunate that he has family that helped this go away. Dale Manukduk, CBC News, Toronto.
The Pride flag has been raised on Parliament Hill to mark the start of Pride Month. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was joined by several ministers and MPs in front of Centre Block for the flag raising. And speaking at the event, Trudeau condemned what he called rising hate against LGBTQ+ people in Canada. He also accused some politicians of trying to deny gender-affirming care to trans youth for their own political gain. Toronto's new professional women's soccer squad is set to kick off next year. Today, the team unveiling its name and look.
We are AFC Toronto. More than a football club, we are a battle cry for change.
AFC Toronto is a founding club member with the Northern Super League, which will get underway for the 2025 season. It's the first pro women's soccer league in the country. You are looking at a live shot of Toronto, a beautiful, calm night. Let's go to Victor Paolo now with a look at how tomorrow and the rest of the week is shaping up. How's it looking, Victor?
Well, let's talk about what we're going to be anticipating when it comes to tomorrow morning, and your little ones are getting ready for school. Well, we can see that it's going to be a hot day. 14 degrees it's supposed to be, a hot start to the day, so you want to make sure that you got themselves with some water bottles attached to all the things they're bringing to school, as well as some light clothing, which isn't too heavy, because we're expecting the day tomorrow, by the time they get home, to increase almost double. It's going to be 26 degrees and sunny, and with the humidex, it could be very close to around 30 degrees. So one thing you want to make sure tomorrow when you are packing everyone ready for school, it's not going to be one of those days where you start off at 14, you come home closer to 10. Well, you're going to start off the day around 14 degrees. It might feel a little cool. By the time you get home at 26 degrees, it is going to be a hot one. Now, talking about trends all across North America, we can see that right here in the south of Ontario, where we're located, southeastern Ontario, one of the hottest places in the country. It's almost like as if it's constantly summertime here. Now, we're expecting those warm temperatures not to last long, because as we get closer to Friday, we might even drop down to closer to below seasonal temperatures. Now, taking a look at what's happening for the overnight temperatures, we can see that Windsor all the way to Ottawa is around 15 degrees and Toronto is around 13. So everyone all across the region is really around that mid-teen mark. Very seasonal overnight temperatures for this time of year. Now, here's what's happening. We're taking a look at our 3- and 5-day forecast. We're expecting a 26-degree day on Tuesday, but that 26-degree day might feel a lot closer to 30 degrees with the humidex. Now, the important thing is when it is warm outside, you want to make sure that you don't leave elderly people or young people who you might have, or pets locked inside vehicles or closed inside vehicles with the windows up, unattended for long periods of time, especially, because that can have very dangerous outcomes. Now, another thing you want to do if you are outdoors, or you're an outdoor enthusiast who likes to get some exercise, make sure that you're hydrated, you bring lots and drink lots of water, as well as making sure that you have that sunscreen applied, because nothing worse than being outdoors on a beautiful hot day when you're unprepared. Now, taking a look at the 3- and 5-day forecast, what else is in store? We talked about Friday, we're going to get to see those seasonal temperatures come right back to us, but then once you head towards Saturday and Sunday, eventually things will get warm again. Hope you have yourselves a great night, and over to you.
Thanks so much, Victor. And that is our show for you tonight. Thank you so much for watching. I will have your next newscast tomorrow at 6. Have a great night, everyone.